Hello, everyone, and welcome into another Coretek Tech Tuesday webinar. Today's webinar will be focused on collaborating with Microsoft Teams Voice. Our presenter today is going to be David Frey. He is one of the pre-sales Microsoft experts here at Coretek, and he's going to walk us through the deck that we have prepared here today. My name is Kevin Marheine. I am the digital marketing specialist here at Coretek Services, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and put those in the chat section. We'll get to those at the end of the webinar. And of course, we'll also be sending up a recording of the webinar following its completion here today. So without any further ado, David, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and go ahead and share what you have for us today.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are having a lot of conversations with clients lately about Teams Voice, and the technology is really matured, and we're really excited to be a Microsoft partner with a strong focus in Teams Voice. Now, Microsoft has developed a global voice network, if you will, that gives us tremendous capabilities. It transitioned off of Skype for Business, which some of you may already use or have used in the past, and so forth. Now all those features are things that we're going to leverage with Teams, and the focus is no longer going to be on the Skype and so forth. So let's just dive in. So Microsoft, with the development of Teams, has really focused on the collaboration and teamwork. And this slide actually, those numbers are a little old. Projected by 2020 that 72% of workers would be working remotely. COVID-19 has made that much higher on a percentage-wise, and we're supporting a lot of customers that are that have had to expand their remote workforce capabilities, and it's really shifted the focus even more so on adopting Teams instead of it just being some other feature that's part of the Office 365 subscription that you may already own, to something that you're truly leveraging. But businesses need a voice solution that's really modernized. And as we talk through this, we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of legacy PBX models, everything from a small business of a handful of users leveraging Teams Voice to multi-location, even multinational solution for a large enterprise. So we may have Teams that we're already using, and we have a PBX on premise. We will talk a little bit about audio conferencing and the capability to dial into meetings and so forth, as well as the traditional public switch telephone network, dial tone, delivered directly to you via your Teams client. Calling in Teams has really evolved to a point where it's a viable alternative to having a phone sitting on a desk next to a computer in a cubicle, although there are devices that support both Teams as well as that DID capability, direct inward dialing capability, if you still have need or desire to use a device on the desk. One of the focuses here is on the ability to replace a traditional phone system and bringing all those capabilities into Office 365. So what does that do for us? Well, it can simplify IT requirements, and what's not mentioned here is it can actually translate to cost savings potentially, not having to upgrade that PBX that is somewhat aging or maybe out of support like we recently saw with one customer, and switching to a Teams-based phone solution. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, okay, great, so you're gonna give me a Teams phone. I need auto tenant and call queuing. Well, Teams does that very, very well. You have the capability of having custom greetings, professionally recorded by services that that record those for you. Sounds very professional, and you leverage those. You got dial by name. When the auto attendant number is dialed, it can be toll free or even local. And then call queuing, where let's just take, for example, the dial by name, where you call in and you hear the auto attendant domain recording, and you press a certain number for the dial by name directory. You type in part of somebody's name, and then it would automatically dial their Teams extension. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is with a calling plan, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes, assigned to an individual user, you literally have a phone number, normal area code, country code, area code, phone number that you can configure in that user's local area if you so choose. For example, I use one every day, and if you call that number, it will ring through directly to the Teams client on my computer and on my phone simultaneously. Audio conferencing is, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is the ability to dial into a meeting. This is where you schedule a Teams meeting, you send it out, auto conferencing license will automatically append a phone number within that meeting, so that users that either don't have the Teams client installed on their device, or maybe they're having some issues with internet, they have the ability, as long as they have access from their cell phone or a physical phone, to still dial into that meeting and participate. I mentioned calling plans. So Microsoft provides calling plan services in multiple regions, and that's growing on a regular basis. And the bottom right shows you the current regions that calling plans are available. So what's a calling plan? A calling plan is very similar to you just making an arrangement with a local telephone provider to have a phone number and inbound dialing and outbound dialing. So Microsoft handles that as a license that you add on to an existing Office 365 license. We talk about other licenses since I mentioned that. There are some components that are required, and Coretek would be happy to have a dedicated conversation to dive into any of these subjects with you in more detail. But with the Office 365, if you're currently using a plan like a Office 365 E3, there would be multiple licenses that we'd have to add on. That two of these would be included if you were at the E5 level. I'm just using this as an example. There's similar options related to the Microsoft 365 for Business and Microsoft 365 Business Phone. Communication credits are something that you would need if you're going to use, for example, inbound toll-free number, because you want people that are calling into your meeting to have access to a toll-free number to where they're not charged for the call. Then you would set up a subscription specific to that with Microsoft, to where you have, and it's very nominal fee, but you just have an amount basically on account that those credits are used whenever a user is making a call or receiving a call related to those credits. In other words, it's not included in your normal calling plan or related subscriptions. It's a nominal add-on cost related to that. So we talked a little bit about calling plans, where I've got 30 users at my small business, and we're just going to go ahead and get calling plans directly from Microsoft associated with the 30 users. But maybe you today already are doing something with a provider, and you have a trunk of numbers coming into a division that you want to move that over to Teams. and that can absolutely be done. Also, and Microsoft calls this direct routing. It kind of relates to the old concept of SIP trunking, where a provider gives you a trunk of lines coming in. They're kind of a digital trunk of lines coming into your location, connects to a session border controller, then connects to other apps or possibly PBX and so forth. With direct routing, we have the capability to do that virtually. So where this can come into play quite frequently is if you've got a certain number of users that exceeds what would be considered cost effective for just using the calling plans that we talked about previously. Microsoft has built and is constantly improving and expanding this global network to support all of these things that we're talking about. And without going over every detail on this slide, it just illustrates that a lot of the features that we enjoy through a traditional PBX solution, and perhaps we're looking at migrating off of some other third-party unified communication platform. We're already using voice over IP solutions and so forth, but we want to transition those services over to Microsoft Teams and leverage our investment in the subscriptions related to that, as well as consolidate and really empower our users in terms of collaboration under a single platform. The Teams Voice is a fantastic solution for that. So how do we get started? One of the things that is pretty slick about the Teams client is just the ability to call anybody else using a VoIP connection or voice over IP, even if you do not have a calling plan or a direct routing number assigned to you as far as PSTN capabilities. Anybody that has access to Teams within your Office 365 tenant has the ability to call back and forth within your organization. And if you are allowing federation with external organizations, you can also make and receive calls with external users. You can also create ad hoc calls where I could just simply open a meeting, add your name to it, and bring you into a call, multiple people into a call. And this is something I'm a big fan. I use Teams as my phone every single day, working remotely. And so Teams literally can become your phone. In my case, I use a headset. I do not have a handset sitting next to my laptop. But you've got the ability to, in this case, we're illustrating that you've got a PSTN line associated with your Microsoft account. And you'll have that's where you'll see this pane become available in your Teams client. And you can manually type in a number, or you can go to your contacts where you see the illustration on the right, click on a contact, call them. And once you have a call open, you can add other people and bring in terms of expanding it to a conference call. The Teams client with the calling plan has all of the traditional calling features already at your fingers. I mentioned earlier that when I receive a call to my Teams phone number, it rings simultaneously on any device I'm signed into. So if I happen to walk away from my desk and have my phone in my pocket, it will ring on my phone as well. And that way you miss fewer calls. But you also have a robust voicemail capability, and the voicemail function or feature also does automatic transcription. If the call is clear enough, you'll get an email that'll show a transcription of the call, of that voicemail as well. And this is just illustrating a outgoing call. The formatting on the slide is a little messed up. Apologize for that. Calling by name. If you're on a call and somebody else calls you and you take that call, the Teams client will automatically place the previous call on hold. Same thing if you join a second Teams meeting, you will your previous one will go on hold, and once you end this particular, in this case, you end this call, you see the resume button, you can just simply resume the previous call. Voicemail, I mentioned the transcription. That is an option that is configurable. And you'll see it in your Teams client, as well as the you'll get an email to your Office 365 email account with that transcription as well. So we can retrieve our voicemails here within the client. And so how do we set up our voicemail? We just go to settings, walk through a few simple steps. We can record our own voice as a greeting. We can leave it to use the defaults. We've got some options related to when the call is answered, as far as how it's going to be handled for voicemail. Default greeting, if we're not recording our own, you have language options for that. We got the ability to transfer calls. Interesting options related to caller ID, and then you always have your call history within the Teams client as well. Related to call transferring, we can send it to another user. We can set it up to blindly transfer calls and so forth. And here's an illustration of a call being transferred to another user. Related to Teams calling history, the Teams client is going to keep your history related to multiple things. In the context here, we're talking about calls. So you've got a history of both inbound calls and voicemails and so forth, missed calls, and you can click on an entry within the history and simply redial that particular person. Devices, I mentioned that I'm using a headset. You have great control over the audio devices, whether you're using the built-in device with the computer, an attached device like a headset or a webcam and so forth, that you can literally change on the fly, even on an active, let's say, video chat or call. And this slide illustrates switching devices during a call. This is very useful to be familiar with this particular feature, because sometimes things go wrong with technology, and for whatever reason your headset stopped working. You can immediately switch it to use the microphone and speaker in the device, or even just dial in from a different device. But the ability to change your audio and even webcam on the fly during an active call does come into handy from time to time when issues with technology happen, especially with a remote workforce where we're relying on third-party internet providers and so forth. Nice thing about having an online chat with someone in Teams is you can immediately change that to a voice call, which is a feature that I personally use fairly frequently. You type a few sentences back and forth and realize, let's just have a quick conversation about this. and just switch it to a voice call. Very useful feature. Once you're on a call, you can easily add someone to the call by clicking the group icon in the control bar and then adding them by name or number. Talked a little bit about call forwarding, and this is an illustration of how we would configure that. We can forward calls to voicemail, we can forward to a different number or a contact, or we can even forward it to a call group, which can have multiple people as part of it. And call controls, these are going to determine how calls are treated when they come into our Teams client. I mentioned previously that my inbound simultaneously rings my cell phone and the Teams client on my computer, but you have a lot of flexibility on that configuration. Mentioned we could forward to a group. So you've got a call group with multiple members, so a call would forward to that group. First person that pick it up is the one that takes the call. We can also have it simultaneously ring a group. Now, Teams also supports federated calls, which involves enterprise, as well as Teams or Skype for Business. Now, over time, organizations will migrate off of Skype for Business to Teams, but the support for Skype will remain until that transition completes. And Coretek has expertise in not only helping that transition, but also in helping with that federation to where you can communicate with another enterprise customer or partner that is using Skype for Business while you've already migrated to Teams. Federated contacts, very similar to our regular contacts. And then just talk briefly for a few minutes about migration strategies. There's a lot more to migrating to Teams than just saying it's technology. A lot of times when we deal with any type of a migration project, there's user adoption is a very key point. A lot of times, people say they have a particular tool that they prefer. Here's some strategies for accelerating a move that you can start now. Start with a migration strategy. Turn on Teams on the tenant. Configure address licensing, assign calling plans and phone system licenses and so forth. Identify champions to help with adoption. Socialize with your champions and kind of take the mystery out of how all of this works. There are paths for migrating in a coexistence versus a straight cutover. And that's really going to depend on the individual circumstances related to your organization. Not going to go into a lot of detail on the specific migration processes. And just highlight that one of the things that can be important when considering Teams voice as an option or an alternative to your current voice solution is conducting a workshop. And that's something that we do a lot of with Coretek, in that a proof of concept to say, okay, well, I'm looking at making a major change to my infrastructure. I need to know that this solution is actually going to work. And we can work with you to do a proof of concept to demonstrate these features. You can try all the features out, see it working in action without ripping out any infrastructure and making a big plunge into cutting over to a new solution before you actually try it. So we'll start with a proof of concept, and that typically would transition into a pilot with a slightly larger audience. And then you make an informed decision that, okay, this is what we want to do. So let's go ahead and frame a project around what's going to take to migrate 1,000 users off of PBXs at 20 different locations to Teams Voice. Or on a small business scenario, 5 users at a single location. The scope is, there's no limit to the scope, and Coretek is definitely available to help you with that, and we'd love to talk more about proof of concept. So that brings us to our question and answer portion of the webinar. So Kevin, did we get any questions come in?
We did have a couple pop up here, David. Thank you for running us through everything. So here to start with, the first question is, can you turn on Do Not Disturb on your phone if you are off from work?
Yes, absolutely. And I did it right before we started this call. And I actually signed off of the Teams client because I didn't want anything to beep in the background while I was talking.
Fantastic. Next question is there a way to get somebody, or is there a way to give somebody a meeting number to join a meeting instead of using the link?
Yes, that's the audio conferencing license that I mentioned. And the number, as long as the user that schedules the meeting has an audio conferencing license assigned to them on the Office 365 tenant, then that number will auto-populate in any meeting that they schedule. Any Teams meeting they schedule will have a phone number in it.
Great. And next up, we have, how well does this work with WVD? We have not been able to get Teams to work with WVD.
That's a really great question. It's something Microsoft has been working on very deliberately. And we have a group of experts on WVD here at Coretek that would be happy to talk to you about that in more detail.
And then the last one we have here is just a question about, where is the call history saved?
Call history is saved with, that's a great question. Where's the underlying data saved? The call history is available from your Teams client. As far as where it's saved itself, Teams actually sits on top of and alongside of SharePoint. So the actual storage location would be in SharePoint.
Great. So taking a look here, I think that covers all the questions we have currently. Just want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today for the webinar. David, again, thank you for running us through everything. I hope everyone found this to be a informative session. And if you do have any further questions, you can reach out to either David or myself, or send us a email at inquiry@coretek.com. And we'll go ahead and be able to route you accordingly here at the team. But David, any final thoughts as we sign off for today?
No, Kevin, but thanks for hosting this, and thank you everyone for joining. We're here to answer any additional questions you have. Just reach out. We'd be happy to continue a dialogue.
Great. And like I said, we will be sending out a recording later today, so you'll have that for your, you can come back and view what everything that was gone over here today. So thanks again, everyone, and we will see you during the next Tech Tuesday webinar. Goodbye.